DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as DreAllDay, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we are on part 5 of our ongoing mini-series, things about marketing that you should know. Let's pick up right where we left off, which is on point number 13. If you haven't caught the first 4 parts of this series, I think you can put 2 and 2 together and know that you probably should. Point number 13, keep it simple. What does this mean when we say keep it simple? It means exactly what it says. Keep it simple. If I had made it any simpler than that, then it wouldn't be simple anymore because I would have to start explaining it. So here now I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated. I'm going to explain it to you. Here's what keep it simple means. Great marketing is never, ever, ever confusing. You are never confused by great marketing. If you are confused by the message, the marketing is not great. The purpose of marketing is to get the message across and to get people to understand what you're saying and entice them to take whatever step you are looking to have them take. That is the purpose of marketing. That is the goal of marketing. If you put together a brilliant message, but people do not understand the purpose and it does not achieve its goal, then it cannot be great by definition. Do you understand? So when there's a clear outcome, when there's a clear outcome and a clear definition of a thing, everything is measured by that definition. That's the purpose of marketing. Confused buyers do nothing. Always remember this. 4-word phrase for any of you doing any marketing, any type of copywriting, any type of advertising. Confused buyers do nothing. What does this mean? This means when you send someone to your website or you ask them to take an action or you give them a call to action, you need to look at your messaging and ask yourself, is this super duper clear to where a 5th grader would understand what I want them to do next? If the answer is anything other than a resounding and immediate yes in all capital letters with an exclamation point, your marketing is too complicated. It is not simple enough. You need to make it simple. You need to strip it down and get it down to the bare essentials. What does the bare essentials mean? It means every single thing that you say, every word that you write, every thing that goes into your message needs to have earned its way into the messaging. If it does not add to the conversation, take it out. This is what most editing is, by the way. Any of you who's done any copywriting or done any editing of, let's just say, your own writing, whenever I edit my own writing, most of what I'm doing is just chopping it down. So if I write a 2,000 word article, most of my work, my editing work, is chopping it down from 2,000 words to 1,500 words. I'm just taking out every word that is not adding to the conversation. And sometimes I read my own articles and say, I could have edited that a little bit more. Instead of being a 1,500 word article, that could have been a 1,000 word article. I used words that I didn't really need to use and they didn't add anything to the conversation or anything to the story. Some of you who may be more outgoing of the species, do you ever find yourself confused? You may ask questions for clarity. And when I say outgoing, what I mean is you're the type of person who, if you are confused, you will raise your hand and say, I'm confused. Can you explain that again? Can you explain it a little bit more slowly? I'm the type of person who does do that. Most people are not like me or like you. Most people, when they are unclear, they do nothing, they say nothing, and they move on and go somewhere in which they are not unclear. They go to a place where they do not find themselves being unclear. And why is this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, people don't want to tell you that they're confused by your messaging because they may assume that it may offend you, that your message was so unclear that they didn't quite get what you were trying to say. And they may be trying to protect you. Another reason people won't say anything is because admitting that they're unclear or not understanding of your message, especially if it seems like others do appear to understand your message, they don't want to be the one who stands out as the one who might not have been smart enough to discern and understand what you were trying to say. So they'll pretend to understand even if they actually don't. This happens in school a lot with kids. When there's a lot of kids in the classroom and there's one kid who doesn't quite understand it, if they have a certain makeup, they may pretend to understand it because they don't want to go against the grain and be the one who didn't know what was going on. Another reason why confused people usually don't say anything is because human beings by nature are lazy. It's easier to say nothing and just let you keep going and let you keep talking than to say something and try to figure out what you're saying. I'll give you an example. When was this? This had to be about, I'm thinking when I'm recording this, this had to be sometime maybe in the summer of 2024. I go to the jacuzzi in my building. Now, in this particular building, the jacuzzi is inside the building, is an indoor jacuzzi. And think about an indoor jacuzzi based on the acoustics of the space. The jacuzzi is there, and then there's also right next to it is a steam room. And the acoustics of the space makes it really hard to have a conversation and talk to people in there because it's very echoey. The room echoes all the time. And if the jacuzzi jets are turned on, you can't really have a conversation unless you're sitting right next to a person and you're talking right into their ear. Otherwise, you can't hear anything that somebody else is saying because the jets are going off inside the jacuzzi and the room echoes. So one day I'm in the jacuzzi and I have my son with me. And he's a baby, so I have him in there and I'm letting him kind of touch the water, but not letting him submerge himself or play too much in it because it's a jacuzzi. Water is actually kind of hot, and you don't want to have young kids in there for too long or too deep. So there's a guy sitting on the other side of the jacuzzi, and he sees me, I see him, we say hello to each other, and he's on the other side of the jacuzzi. Now this is not some tiny jacuzzi. This jacuzzi is probably about 15 feet long and about 10 feet wide, so it's pretty big. So you can fit a lot of people in there. He's on the complete other side from where I am, the long way. And he decides to strike up it wasn't even a conversation. Well, it was a conversation, but it was a one-sided conversation. In other words, he was talking and I was pretending to listen to what he was saying because I could not understand a single thing that this guy was saying for a couple of reasons. Number one, he had an accent. I believe it was a Latin accent. Down here in South Florida, you get a lot of that. So he had a Latin accent, number one. And number two, he was referring to something with me and my child. So I'm assuming that he's a parent and maybe he has kids who are a little bit older than mine. And this happens all the time when I'm out with my son, especially as he's young. I get people coming up to me, and especially men, telling me how they remember when their kid was that age and enjoy it, and they're going to grow up and they're going to be so old soon, they're going to be grabbing the car keys and they're going to be moving out of the house. I get men saying that to me all the time when I'm out with my son, especially because he's young. And I believe, I'm just guessing here, that this is what this guy was telling me about. And he talked for a good 3-4 minutes straight. And I do not know what the hell, I don't know a single word this guy was saying. But I knew he was talking about the kid because he was gesturing towards him and saying things. And I could tell by his body language, he was just appreciating the fact that he saw me as a dad spending time with my kid. And I guess it triggered a thought in him about himself spending time with his kids, or maybe not spending time with his kids. The point is, the entire time I was confused as to what exactly he was saying, but I did not tell him that I couldn't hear him because I didn't want him to come closer, nor did I want him to repeat himself because I was trying to spend time with my kid and I didn't really want to talk to this guy. This is what I mean. All right, when people are confused, they're not going to tell you they're confused. They're going to act like they understand you and they're just going to keep going. That's what's going to happen. And they're not going to take the action that you want them to take because they don't know what action you want them to take because, again, they're confused. You understand? Most people will just pretend that they understand you even though they don't. So your job is to make sure your message is so clear so as not to be misconstrued even by the dumbest person in the neighborhood. That means you must spare us your brilliance. What does that mean? Any of you who's worked in any form of marketing or copywriting or advertising has probably heard this before. Spare us your brilliance means do not be so genius and give us so much of your intellect that you go over the heads of the people to whom we are trying to get our message across. Your message can't be too smart for the people you're trying to reach. If your message is too smart, they won't understand what the hell you are saying. It has to be simple enough that they can get it. When it comes to someone like President Donald Trump, the people who do not like him often like to say, well, the reason Donald Trump won is because he's only reaching an audience of people who are uneducated, unintelligent, uninformed. They don't know what's happening, and there's enough dumb people that he's able to win the election. I counter that and say, on the contrary, the genius of Donald Trump is that his message is so simple that no one is ever confused about what he is saying, where he is going, what he's going to do, and what he meant. None of you listening to him, whether you like him or dislike him, has ever been confused about what he just said when he gets done speaking. Never, ever. There is genius in clarity. There is genius in clarity. Some of you who, let's say you don't like Donald Trump, or maybe somebody who's not listening to this doesn't like Donald Trump, considers himself a lot smarter than him and a lot smarter than his supporters. Okay, fine. Have you ever delivered a message to an audience of less than 300 million people like Donald Trump did and had people confused about what the hell you just said? Some of you can't give a clear message to 30 people, let alone can you give a clear message to 300 million people. That is a skill. Giving a clear message to a wide range of people who have different leanings, different beliefs, different levels of intelligence and understanding, and different levels of education, but none of them is unclear as to what you said. That is a skill, ladies and gentlemen. That's not something that you just fall into. And the thing that I've always retorted to the anti-Trump audience with is, okay, well, if you're so much smarter than his audience, why weren't you able to figure out how to beat him at the game? All you had to do was dumb down your intelligence to match him where he's at. Just beat him at it. Why didn't you do it? because it's a skill. It's not as easy as it sounds. It sounds easy to say, oh, you're just talking to people who are not that smart. That's easy. No, it's not. Any of you adults ever try to give a speech to a room full of elementary school kids? Not as easy as talking to a room full of adults, believe it or not. It's harder to give a speech to a bunch of fourth graders than it is to give a speech to a bunch of 40-year-olds. Why? Because the fourth graders will show you viscerally when you have lost their attention, and you better get it immediately, and you better keep it every single minute, because they are not trained to be polite and pretend to listen to you. When you're done, they don't clap for you out of politeness or out of professional duty. See, grown adults will pretend that they enjoy what you're saying, even if your speech is terrible. I sat through a whole bunch of terrible speeches given by adults, and I still clapped for them when they were done. I don't give terrible speeches, but I've sat through some terrible speeches, and I clapped for the person when they were finished. Why? Because that's what we're trained to do, to be polite adults. See, a 4-year-old is not going to do that. A fourth grader is not going to do it either. All right, they're going to let you know that you're boring because they're going to stop paying attention to you as soon as you get boring. So the point being, I think most of us would agree that a 40-year-old often has more gathered intelligence and education than a fourth grader. However, reaching the fourth graders is not as easy as it sounds until you stand in front of a bunch of fourth graders and try to talk to them and keep their attention for 3 minutes, let alone 30. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? So your marketing needs to be super clear such that no one can ever misconstrue your message. Again, think Donald Trump. What they say about presidential campaigns is that the lower the education level of your speech, the more likely you win. In other words, when you give a speech, some of you are really smart. Some of you are college educated. Some of you have advanced degrees, meaning you stayed in college more than 4 years to get another degree. And your level of discourse, i.e. the way you talk and you write, and the way you speak, it reflects that level of intelligence. That's fine as long as you're talking to other people who are also at your level. There's a challenge for a bunch of you highly educated folks, because you hang around other highly educated people and you get used to talking to each other in this way. The problem is, as soon as you step out of that space and you start talking like that to the average person, you lose them because they have no idea what the hell you're talking about, because they don't have the education that you have. They don't have your vocabulary. So you have to be able to dumb it down, if you will, to make it simple enough that anyone can understand. And they say that when a political candidate is speaking, that if they're going to be successful and reach the masses, they need to speak on about a second or third grade level. And they do this in writing. Any of you who does any writing, there's software out there that you can take your writing, let's say your article, and you can copy paste your article into the software, and it will tell you what reading level your writing is on. It will tell you this is an 8th grade level, this is a high school level, this is a collegiate level. If your stuff is on a collegiate level, you better be writing that for a bunch of collegiate students. If you're writing your article for a general audience, your stuff better be on an elementary school level, meaning it should not go past the 5th grade. Because if it goes past the 5th grade, most of the people reading it will not know what the hell you are talking about. You will lose them. Do you understand this? What I tell people is the 5th grader test. Remember they had that TV show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? Here's what I tell people. Whatever level of expertise, whatever area of expertise you have, and whatever thing you're trying to explain to a mass of people, you don't quite know exactly who all of them are, you should be able to explain your level of, you should be able to explain your expertise to a 5th grader who's usually around 10 years of age in such a way that they understand you and that they could explain back to you what you just told them in their own words. If you're good at explaining yourself, a 5th grader should be able to disseminate your knowledge coming from you, because you can make it simple enough for them to get it. Now, see, you can't talk to a 5th grader the way you talk to a room full of master's degree, or what are people in advanced college degree classes, whatever they're called. Now, I don't even know, because you see, I didn't go there. All right, whatever it takes to get an advanced degree, whatever they call those classes, all right, you can't talk to a bunch of 5th graders the way you will talk to them. You got to make it simple enough that they can get it. And my question to you is, do you have that skill? Because that is a skill. So people should be able to hear you and understand you in one sitting. Some of you may not know about the famous, very famous marketing presentation done by Steve Jobs. It might be the most famous marketing presentation ever given. It was when he introduced this device that we all have now called the smartphone. His was specifically called the iPhone. And in that presentation, Steve Jobs said a MP3 player, a computer, and a phone in one device. And he was on stage giving this presentation. And then he said it again, exact same thing. An MP3 player, a computer, and a phone in one device. And the crowd went wild when he said that, because he was making it extremely simple for everyone to understand what he was presenting to them. Those of you listening to this now says, well, it doesn't sound that crazy to you now because you're used to it. You've grown up with this device. But when he was introducing this, you got to understand this didn't exist. An MP3 player with all the songs in your pocket. That was the iPod at the time. A computer, we all knew what those were, but they sat on a desk and you couldn't carry it around. And a phone, we all knew what those were as well, but we had to carry that in our pockets. So back in the day, you had to have a phone and an iPod for your music and a computer if you wanted to use all three. He said, we're going to put all these three in one thing and it fits in your pocket. This was revolutionary. The point was he made it so simple that everybody got it. And Steve Jobs, for all accounts, was a pretty smart guy. There's a book on Steve. It's actually named after him. It's written by a guy named Walter Isaacson. If you haven't read it, I would suggest that you do, especially if you're a user of Apple products. It'll help you understand a lot about why Apple is who they are to this very day. It is because of him. So you should be able to explain what you do, who you do it for, why somebody wants it within a sentence. And think about a bio on your social media profile, for example. It should clearly explain who you help, how you help them, and without a long explanation, because you don't have room for a long explanation in your social media bio. Think of the quote unquote elevator pitch. I don't have an elevator pitch. My elevator pitch would be what I would put in the social media bio. I would say, I help service entrepreneurs systematize and scale their businesses from the 6-figure level to the 7-figure level, period. Now, if I'm talking to a 5th grader, I might dumb that down a little bit because they might not know what systematize and scaling even means. So I would dumb it down to make it a little bit more simple, but that's how I put it in one sentence for someone who knows what I'm talking about, which is my target audience, because the 5th grader is not my customer. So I wouldn't say that to them. I would say something different. You get my point? If I was talking to a 5th grader, I might say, well, you know how some people out there own businesses? I help them make more money. That might get them intrigued. Well, how do you do that? Now I can start telling them other things. Now, because they asked me a question, now I can go a little bit deeper. So it should clearly explain where you're at. It does not mean there isn't a long explanation, but it means you should be able to get your point across without giving a long explanation. Clarity is key. Point number 14. Today's topic, once again, is the keys to marketing that you need to know that you may have overlooked. Number 14, tell great stories. Tell great stories and tell a lot of stories. Great marketing is all about telling a story. That's all it is. If you ever bought athletic gear from a company called Nike, of which I am a consistent customer, there's a tag inside of a lot of their equipment, their clothes, that says, engineered to the exact specifications of championship athletes. What is that? That's a story. Engineered to the exact specifications of championship athletes. That's what it says on the tag on some Nike gear. And if you got a pair of Nike sneakers, go look. You'll see a tag on there that says that. At least it used to always say that. And what is that letting you know? It is Nike letting you, the consumer, know who they make their stuff for. The best athletes in the world. Now, at the same time, understand something, because you may be confused right now. Most of Nike's customers are not championship athletes. Actually, the championship athletes, they don't buy stuff from Nike. They get it for free. Tiger Woods doesn't buy from Nike. All right, they send him all his stuff for free. Michael Jordan ain't buying anything. They send it to him for free. LeBron James, he ain't buying nothing. So why does Nike say that they make their stuff to be engineered to the exact specifications of championship athletes? Because remember what marketing is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a story. Marketing is about the story. So most of Nike's customers are not LeBron James, and not Serena Williams, and not Tiger Woods, and not Roger Federer. Why do they buy this stuff if it's made for a championship athlete and they're not even an athlete at all and never will be an athlete? Because the people who buy their stuff want to feel like a championship athlete. That's why you buy Nike gear. You don't buy a pair of Jordans because you believe you're going to become Michael Jordan and win 6 NBA championships and score 63 points in a game and be the most iconic basketball player in history. That's not why you buy the Jordans. You buy the Jordans because you want to feel like that guy, even though you're not him. Same reason you bought Gatorade when it was Michael Jordan. The whole campaign, be like Mike, beautiful campaign. 3 words. All of you remember the campaign. That commercial hasn't come out in 30 years. 3 words. Be like Mike. What is that? That's a story. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, a story does not have to be some long, J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter book, Stephen King book. That's not the only way to write a story. A story can be 3 words. Be like Mike is a story. All of you know what it means, right? All you remember the jingle, right? All you remember the product, right? And all of you bought it back then and drank it, right? Why? Simple marketing. I told you, all these pieces go together, folks. And they told you it over and over and over again to where that commercial ain't run in 25, 30 years, but all of you remember it if you saw it when it was out. Every single one of you. Stories, folks. Nike sells products to everyday people, weekend warriors, people who wake up in the morning and work out before they go to their 9-to-5 jobs, people who have never been athletes and never will be. because they want to feel like an athlete. That identity is how you sell products. That's the connection that I mentioned earlier in the series. Are you getting it now? Point number 15. Today's topic, once again, things about marketing that you need to understand. Number 15, play the long game. This means run the marathon, folks. I've done episodes on this. And, oops, what did I do? I talked about the many stages of the marathon in episode 1457. I told you how to finish the marathon strong, episode 1044. I told you life is a marathon in episode 360. I've actually run a couple of marathons. I'm not running anymore, but I have run a few. So I'm speaking from experience. Episode 1336, how to play the long game like a true professional. Episode number 314, how to play and win the long game of life. I'm telling you here how to play the long game, or to play the long game. What does this mean? Frequency over time equals trust. Or frequency plus time equals trust. Write that equation down. Let me say it again. Frequency plus time equals trust. This is why I told you that you may not be able to control going viral, but you can control being consistent. I've never had an episode of this show go viral, but I've consistently put out an episode every single day for, just checking my document here, 3,200, what number is this? 3,270 days in a row. 3,270 days straight, I'll put something out here on the show. Never had a single episode go viral. But a whole bunch of people have come to know, like, and trust me because of the consistency, not because of the virality. You understand? That's the long game. I'm not saying you got to put out 3,000 episodes of your show. I'm saying you do need to be consistent over time. Frequency builds trust. If you think about it, this is how you come to trust everything and everyone in your life because of the amount of time, the time of the relationship. If you look at your credit score, they tell you what are the pieces that go into a credit score. One of the pieces of your credit score is the average length of accounts. What does that mean? How long have you had your credit? So if you open 5 new credit cards today, even if they all are willing to give you credit, it's going to actually hurt your credit score in some ways. It will help in some ways because you have more available credit. So your, your utilization will be lower because you have more available credit with all those new cards. At the same time, your average length of account is going to be shorter because you got all these accounts that now have 0 time. The length is going to pull that number down. So your score could go up or down even if you open a bunch of accounts all at the same time. And also because you're the hard credit inquiries at the same time. The point is you build trust the longer you stay in doing a thing. Okay, I mentioned this earlier in the series as well. Okay, longevity beats virality because you cannot control virality. All of you can control showing up every day, consistently doing the work, building a relationship with your audience that increases the know, like, trust factors over time. All of you can do that. All of you can do that. Everyone who's listening to my voice is capable of this form of execution. That's the reason why we open the show talking about discipline. Show up day to day to do the work. All of you are capable of doing that. Regardless of what the work is, regardless of how good you are at the work. I didn't say be good at the work. I just said show up and do the work. I didn't say be good, just show up. Can you just show up? Depending on who you ask, showing up is anywhere from 60 to 90% of the job in life. And I agree. Somewhere between 60 and 90, depending on what you're doing. Playing the long game is how you win in a career, in a profession, and in life. Is playing the long game. That's how you win. All of you can think of times in your life, anyone who's over the age of, let's just say people over the age of 40, because you had enough life experience to know. Any of you over the age of 40 has been in situations in your life when it looked like you were failing, you were losing, that things were not going to turn around, and you maybe even had people express this to you. Maybe you expressed it to yourself or to others. And because you stayed in the game, at least the situations in which you did stay in the game, you turned things around and look at you now. The long game. The good thing about structure and discipline, folks, because playing the long game requires structure and discipline, is that everyone has these available to them. Again, you don't always have available to have the most talent or the most resources or to be in a lucky position or to know the right person or the right person to know you. You can't control those things. If you have them, great, use them, but you don't always have those things. But any one of you can follow a structure and as a result be disciplined. None of you has those things inaccessible to you. Let's put it that way. Unlike talent, unlike certain biology, genetics, all of those things, that happens to some people, but it doesn't happen to everybody. Everybody's not going to be tall. Everybody's not going to be handsome or pretty. Not everyone's going to have certain things shine on them as much as other people. But everybody can show up no matter what you got. Discipline is completely under your control at all times. That's it. Recap. Today's next episode in the series of things you need to know about marketing. Number 13, keep it simple. Clarity is the key, folks. Think of the marketing campaigns you remember the most. They were very simple. It was no way for you to get confused as to exactly what they were telling you. Number 14, tell great stories. Nike says our gear is engineered to the specifications of championship athletes. Most of their customers are not championship athletes, and they buy it anyway because they want to connect to the feeling of being a championship athlete, and that is a story. Gatorade's Be Like Mike campaign, the 3 words Be Like Mike, is a story in and of itself. I am Tiger Woods. Remember that one? Another story. Again, how many Tiger Woodses are there? Just one. But a whole bunch of people went out and bought Nike golf gear because they want to feel like Tiger Woods, even though they knew they actually were not Tiger Woods. And number 15, play the long game. Frequency plus time equals trust. And you want the knowing you, liking you, and trusting you factors working in your favor as a business owner, or as a business period, or just a professional period. And that comes from amount of time and consistently doing something over an extended period of time in a way that people can come to expect it from you. When people expect things, they depend on it. When people depend on things, they'll pay for it. All that said, everybody, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to learn how to start implementing these things into your business so that you can stop sitting on the sidelines, stop waiting, get the right stories in place so that people are no longer unclear about who you are, what you're doing, that you can move people to action now instead of later. Instead of having them tell you they'll do it later, but wanting to do it now because you told them a story that has them ready to go. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Have me as your direct coach, and let's get to it. Work on your game. Dre all